February 20th, 1944, 32,000 feet above central Germany, the air inside the Boeing B-17G Flying Fortress, designated as Mi Amigo, was so thin and cold that exhaled breath crystallized instantly against oxygen masks. Engine oil vapor mixed with the metallic scent of high-altitude air, while 4 Wright R-1820 Cyclone engines thundered in perfect synchronization. Second Lieutenant John Kriegshauser, 23 years old, watched the dawn sun pierce through a sea of frozen clouds, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Below, the Messerschmitt aircraft factories of Leipzig waited in the industrial haze. Above, only the void remained, and the absolute certainty that this would be a mission written in blood. The young pilot from Dayton, Ohio, had volunteered for bomber duty 18 months earlier, drawn by stories of precision bombing and the promise that American industrial might could end the war through strategic air power. His hands, already numb despite heated flight gloves, gripped the control yoke of a machine that represented the pinnacle of American aerospace engineering. Each B-17G carried 10 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns, 4,000 pounds of high-explosive ordnance, and the hopes of a nation determined to bring the Third Reich to its knees through relentless aerial bombardment. The Flying Fortress had earned its name through early combat trials, but German fighter pilots had developed their own terminology for the American heavy bombers. They called them flying coffins and sky whale, lumbering defenseless targets that would provide easy victories for experienced Luftwaffe aces. Oberleutnant Klaus Mietusch, a decorated pilot with 47 confirmed kills, had briefed his squadron just hours earlier with characteristic Prussian confidence. The Americans, he declared, flew in predictable formations like migrating birds, relying on altitude and wishful thinking, rather than tactical intelligence and air combat mastery. German Fighter Command had analyzed captured B-17 wreckage and concluded that while the bomber possessed impressive defensive firepower, it remained vulnerable to coordinated attacks from multiple vectors. Luftwaffe tactics manuals recommended high-speed frontal assaults, followed by coordinated rear attack, exploiting blind spots in the American defensive. The arrogance was not unfounded. Throughout 1943, bomber losses over heavily defended German targets had reached unsustainable levels, with some missions experiencing casualty rates approaching 30%. But February 20th, 1944, would mark a turning point that few could anticipate. The Mi Amigo belonged to the 305th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force, part of a massive strategic bombing campaign designed to cripple German aircraft production and transportation infrastructure. Each flying fortress represented a microcosm of American industrial capability. Aluminum airframes manufactured in Seattle, engines produced in Cincinnati, defensive armaments crafted in Connecticut, and electronic systems assembled in Massachusetts. The bomber's very existence testified to a continental manufacturing network that German planners had consistently underestimated. The technical specifications of the B-17G revealed the depth of American aerospace engineering achievement. Maximum gross weight reached 65,000 pounds, powered by 4 Wright R-1820-97 Cyclone radial engines, producing 1,200 horsepower each. Service ceiling extended to 35,000 feet, with a maximum range of 2,000 miles when configured for extended missions. The defensive armament included twin 50 caliber machine guns in the chin turret, dorsal turret, ball turret, and tail position, supplemented by single guns in the waist positions and radio compartment. American military planners understood that strategic bombing required not just advanced aircraft, but integrated logistics systems capable of supporting sustained operations deep inside enemy territory. Each mission demanded precise coordination between weather reconnaissance, fighter escort scheduling, target intelligence, ammunition supply, fuel distribution, and medical evacuation capability. The industrial infrastructure supporting these operations represented a logistical achievement that dwarfed anything attempted in previous conflicts. As the Mi Amigo approached German airspace, radio intercepts revealed increasing Luftwaffe fighter activity. Ground-based radar stations had tracked the incoming bomber formations since they crossed the Dutch coastline, providing German fighter controllers with accurate altitude, heading, and estimated strength data. Focke-Wulf 190 and Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters were already climbing to intercept altitude, their pilots confident that another day of American losses was about to unfold. Lieutenant Kriegshauser maintained radio discipline as his formation penetrated deeper into occupied Europe. The young pilot had completed 12 combat missions, experiencing the terror and exhilaration of aerial combat over some of the most heavily defended targets in the Third Reich. Each mission had taught him something new about the delicate balance between courage and survival, between individual heroism and collective responsibility. The men who flew these missions understood that they were participating in something larger than personal glory. They were testing the limits of American industrial resolve against German defensive determination. The Luftwaffe response began precisely as predicted. At 0847 hours, approximately 60 miles from the target area, the first German fighters appeared as tiny specks against the morning sky. Messerschmitt Bf 109G fighters, equipped with cannon and machine gun armament, dove from superior altitude in classic attack formations. The German pilots had perfected their tactics through 3 years of combat experience, understanding exactly how to exploit bomber formation weaknesses while minimizing exposure to defensive fire. Radio chatter exploded across the bomber formation as tail gunners called out fighter positions and pilots maneuvered to maintain mutual defensive coverage. The sky transformed into a three-dimensional battlefield where split-second decisions determined survival or annihilation. Tracer rounds created geometric patterns against the blue void, while aircraft engines screamed under combat power setting. The clinical precision of pre-mission briefings dissolved into the chaotic reality of aerial combat at temperatures 40 degrees below zero. The first coordinated attack shattered the bomber formation's defensive integrity. German fighters approached from multiple vectors simultaneously, forcing individual B-17s to break formation and fight alone. The Mi Amigo shuddered under the impact of 20mm cannon shells that punched through aluminum skin with devastating efficiency. Engine number 3 erupted in flames, streaming burning oil across the right wing. Hydraulic systems failed, causing control surfaces to respond sluggishly to pilot inputs. In the tail compartment, Staff Sergeant Robert Clark fell silent, his intercom connection severed by enemy fire. Lieutenant Kriegshauser felt the bomber's handling characteristics change dramatically as mechanical systems failed throughout the Wright Cyclone engine, marvels of American aeronautical engineering, continued operating despite damage that would have destroyed lesser power plants. But even American industrial excellence had limits, and those limits were being tested at 30,000 feet above enemy territory. The young pilot faced the fundamental equation of aerial warfare: maintain control long enough to complete the mission, or preserve the crew by attempting an emergency landing in hostile territory. The navigation systems provided sobering intelligence about their tactical situation. They had penetrated approximately 200 miles into German airspace, with another 100 miles remaining to reach the primary target. Fighter escort coverage had ended at the Rhine River, leaving the bombers to rely entirely on their own defensive capabilities. Weather reconnaissance indicated scattered cloud cover that could provide concealment, but also created navigation hazards that made precision bombing extremely difficult. As the damaged bomber struggled to maintain formation integrity, the true test of American aerospace engineering began to reveal itself. The B-17's structural design incorporated redundant systems and damage-resistant construction techniques that reflected hard-learned lessons from earlier combat operations. While individual components failed under enemy fire, the aircraft's essential systems continued functioning through backup mechanisms and crew improvisation. This resilience had not emerged by accident. It represented the accumulated expertise of American engineers who understood that combat aircraft must continue operating under conditions that exceeded all peacetime specifications. Flight Engineer Technical Sergeant Michael Sullivan worked frantically to isolate damaged systems and redistribute power to essential components. His training at technical schools across the United States had prepared him for mechanical failures, but combat damage created challenges that no textbook could address. Oil pressure readings fluctuated wildly, electrical systems sparked intermittently, and hydraulic fluid leaked through bullet holes in critical lines. The sergeant's hands moved with practiced efficiency, applying emergency procedures while coordinating with other crew members through increasingly unreliable intercom systems. The bomber's defensive armament continued functioning despite extensive battle damage. Ball turret gunner Staff Sergeant James Thompson maintained disciplined fire control, conserving ammunition for maximum effectiveness while directing defensive fire against attacking fighters. The Browning M2 machine guns, products of American small arms manufacturing expertise, delivered sustained firepower that forced German pilots to respect the Flying Fortress's defensive capabilities. Each 50 caliber round represented a small masterpiece of metallurgy and ballistic, designed to penetrate enemy aircraft structures at extreme range and altitude. German fighter pilots, adapted their attack patterns as the engagement evolved. Initial frontal assaults had damaged several bombers, but coordinated defensive fire from the formation had destroyed 2 Messerschmitt fighters and damaged several others. Luftwaffe tactics emphasized persistence and coordination, with successive attack waves designed to overwhelm defensive fire through sheer numerical superiority. The sky became a laboratory where German tactical doctrine confronted American engineering resilience, with survival depending on which philosophy proved more effective under combat conditions. Lieutenant Kriegshauser realized that reaching the target would require extraordinary measures. The Mi Amigo's airspeed had decreased significantly due to engine damage and aerodynamic disruption from battle damage. Altitude was bleeding away despite maximum power settings on the remaining engines. Navigation equipment provided approximate position fixes, but precision bombing would be impossible without functional bombsight systems. The fundamental question became whether to abort the mission and preserve the crew, or continue toward the target, despite overwhelming tactical disadvantages. The young pilot's decision reflected training principles embedded throughout American military doctrine. Mission completion took priority over individual survival, but only when success remained tactically feasible. The bomber crew had trained for months to deliver precision strikes against German industrial targets, understanding that each successful mission contributed to overall strategic objectives. But they had also learned that martyrdom without tactical achievement served no useful purpose in a conflict that would be won through sustained operational effectiveness rather than individual heroics. Weather conditions provided an unexpected tactical opportunity. Cloud formations ahead offered concealment from German fighters while creating navigation challenges that required expert piloting skill. The wounded bomber could potentially evade further attacks by utilizing terrain features and meteorological conditions, but this approach demanded precise coordination between pilot, navigator, and engineer. American flight training had emphasized adaptability and crew cooperation, preparing airmen for situations where standard procedures proved inadequate. As the Mi Amigo limped toward the target area, radio transmissions revealed the broader scope of the day's operations. Other bomber formations were engaging German fighters across a front extending from the Netherlands to central Germany. The 8th Air Force had committed over 800 heavy bombers to simultaneous attacks on aircraft factories, ball-bearing plants, and transportation hubs. This coordinated offensive represented the largest strategic bombing effort in military history, demonstrating American industrial capacity to sustain massive air operations despite severe losses. The tactical situation stabilized temporarily as German fighters withdrew to refuel and rearm. This respite provided essential time for damage assessment and system repairs. Flight crews throughout the formation worked to restore communication, repair mechanical failures, and treat wounded personnel. The brief calm revealed both the effectiveness of German defensive tactics and the remarkable resilience of American aircraft and crew training. Bombers that should have been destroyed by any reasonable standard continued flying through crew resourcefulness and engineering excellence. Navigation calculations indicated that the target remained within reach if current airspeeds could be maintained. The Messerschmitt factories at Leipzig represented crucial components of German fighter production, supplying Bf 109 aircraft that formed the backbone of Luftwaffe interceptor squadron. Successful attacks on these facilities would directly impact German air combat capabilities, potentially reducing fighter opposition for future bombing missions. The strategic importance of the target justified extraordinary risks, but only if tactical success remained achievable. Lieutenant Kriegshauser consulted with his crew about continuing the mission versus attempting an emergency landing. Each man understood the implications of both choices. Completing the bombing run would fulfill their training and contribute to overall war objectives, but probably meant death for most or all crew members. Aborting the mission offered better survival chances, but represented failure to complete assigned objectives. American military doctrine emphasized individual initiative within the framework of mission accomplishment, trusting crew judgment to make appropriate tactical decisions. The unanimous decision surprised no one familiar with American bomber crew culture. They would continue toward the target, deliver their ordnance with maximum precision possible under current conditions, and then attempt to return to England. This choice reflected values embedded throughout American military training: duty, sacrifice, and confidence in technological superiority over enemy systems. The crew understood that their individual survival mattered less than demonstrating American resolve and capability under extreme adversity. Weather reconnaissance had understated the cloud coverage over the target area. Dense formations of cumulus clouds concealed the ground at crucial altitudes, making visual bombing nearly impossible. The bomber's Norden bomb site, a marvel of precision engineering, required clear visibility to achieve acceptable accuracy. Under current conditions, bombing would rely primarily on radar approximations and educated guesswork, rather than the precision targeting that justified strategic bombing doctrine. Despite these limitations, the Mi Amigo approached the initial point for its bombing run. The remaining engines operated at maximum sustainable power, generating vibrations that threatened to tear the damaged aircraft apart. Control surfaces responded erratically to pilot inputs, requiring constant corrections to maintain heading and altitude. The bomber had been transformed from a precision instrument of warfare into a barely controlled projectile aimed at enemy industrial targets. Bombardier Second Lieutenant William Martinez prepared for weapons release under conditions that exceeded all training scenarios. His Norden bombsight provided approximate target solutions based on dead reckoning navigation and radar fixes, but precision bombing required visual target identification that remained impossible through the cloud cover. The lieutenant understood that ordnance delivery under these conditions would be largely symbolic, demonstrating American determination rather than achieving measurable tactical results. The bomb bay doors opened with mechanical precision despite hydraulic system damage. 4,000 pounds of high-explosive ordnance hung suspended above German territory, awaiting release commands from the bombardier. Each weapon represented months of American industrial production. Steel casings forged in Pennsylvania, explosive fillers manufactured in Tennessee, fusing systems assembled in Massachusetts. The bombs embodied American manufacturing capability, transformed into strategic weapons designed to cripple German war production. Ordnance release occurred at 11:47 hours, approximately 12 miles southeast of Leipzig. The Mi Amigo lurched upward as 4,000 pounds of bombs separated from their suspension point and began their ballistic trajectory toward Earth. Whether these weapons struck their intended targets would remain unknown until post-mission reconnaissance could assess battle damage. The bomber crew had fulfilled their primary mission requirement, delivering American ordnance against German industrial infrastructure despite overwhelming tactical obstacles. With weapons delivered, Lieutenant Kriegshauser faced the challenge of returning to England in a critically damaged aircraft. The bomber's operational capabilities had degraded catastrophically during the mission. Navigation systems provided only approximate position fixes, communication equipment functioned intermittently, and engine performance continued deteriorating. The mathematical probability of reaching friendly territory appeared minimal, but American aircrew training had prepared them for situations where standard calculations proved inadequate. The return flight began under conditions that would test every aspect of American aerospace engineering and aircrew training. The Mi Amigo flew at reduced altitude to conserve remaining engine power while maintaining airspeed sufficient for controllability. This flight profile exposed the bomber to increased risks from German fighters and anti-aircraft artillery, but offered the only realistic possibility of reaching the English Channel. Navigation would rely primarily on dead reckoning and celestial observation, skills that distinguished experienced aircrews from novice personnel. German fighters appeared again as the wounded bomber crossed into occupied Netherlands. Luftwaffe pilots recognized that damaged aircraft represented high-value targets with reduced defensive capability. The coordinated attack that followed tested the limits of American defensive doctrine and crew coordination. Machine gun ammunition supplies had been depleted during earlier engagements, forcing gunners to carefully select targets and conserve firepower for maximum effectiveness. The engagement demonstrated how combat experience transformed theoretical training into practical survival skill. Each crew member understood his individual responsibilities within the collective defensive system, but also recognized when circumstances required adaptation and improvisation. Radio operator Staff Sergeant David Allen coordinated defensive fire while transmitting position reports and damage assessments to other air. Navigator Second Lieutenant Charles Foster calculated course corrections that would optimize their chances of reaching friendly territory before fuel exhaustion or mechanical failure ended the flight. Engine number 3 finally ceased operation entirely as the bomber crossed the Rhine River. The Wright Cyclone power plant, which had continued running despite severe battle damage, succumbed to accumulated mechanical stress and oil system failure. The Mi Amigo's flight characteristics changed dramatically as power output decreased and aerodynamic drag increased. Maintaining altitude became impossible, forcing a gradual descent that brought the bomber within range of German anti-aircraft artillery. Lieutenant Kriegshauser demonstrated why American pilot training emphasized adaptability and technical competence. The young officer redistributed power settings among the remaining engines while adjusting control surface trim to compensate for asymmetrical thrust conditions. His modifications maintained controllable flight despite mechanical failures that should have made powered flight impossible. This performance reflected thousands of hours of training that prepared American aircrew for emergencies exceeding all reasonable expectations. The bomber's fuel consumption increased dramatically as the remaining engines operated at maximum power setting. Flight engineer Sullivan calculated that fuel exhaustion would occur approximately 100 miles short of the English coastline unless consumption could be reduced immediately. This calculation created an impossible tactical equation. Reducing power settings would cause loss of altitude and controllability, but maintaining current power would ensure fuel exhaustion over the North Sea. As the Mi Amigo struggled across occupied Europe, other bombers in the formation faced similar challenges. Radio transmissions revealed that several aircraft had been forced to attempt emergency landings in enemy territory, while others had ditched in the North Sea with minimal survival prospects. The day's mission would eventually be recorded as a tactical success based on target damage assessment. The human cost would reflect the brutal mathematics of strategic bombing camps. The bomber crossed into Belgian airspace with 3 engines operating at reduced efficiency and fuel supplies approaching critical levels. Ground features became increasingly familiar as the aircraft approached areas liberated by Allied ground force earlier in 1944. The psychological impact of reaching friendly territory could not be measured, but provided essential morale benefits for crew members who had endured 6 hours of combat operations over enemy territory. Weather conditions over the English Channel created additional navigation challenges that tested crew coordination and technical expertise. Cloud formations obscured visual landmarks, while generating turbulence that stressed the damaged airframe beyond design specifications. Radio communication with British ground controllers became possible, providing crucial navigation assistance and emergency landing information for aircraft approaching fuel exhaustion. The Mi Amigo's final approach to its home base required extraordinary piloting skill and crew coordination. Landing gear extension created additional aerodynamic drag that threatened to stall the aircraft at approach speeds. Hydraulic system damage prevented normal brake operation, forcing reliance on emergency mechanical systems that provided minimal stopping capability. The bomber's approach resembled a controlled crash more than a conventional landing, but demonstrated how American training prepared aircrews for situations where textbook procedures proved inadequate. Ground personnel witnessed the bomber's final approach with mixture of admiration and horror. The aircraft's battle damage was visible from considerable distances. Engine cowlings torn apart by cannon fire, control surfaces perforated by machine gun rounds, and hydraulic fluid streaming from damaged lines. That the Mi Amigo had survived the return flight testified to both American engineering excellence and the extraordinary skill of its crew members. The landing occurred at 15:47 hours, nearly 9 hours after takeoff. The bomber rolled to a stop well beyond the normal touchdown point, its brakes marginally functional and engines operating at minimum sustainable power. As ground crews approached the aircraft, they discovered battle damage that should have made powered flight impossible. Cannon shells had penetrated critical structural components, machine gun rounds had severed essential control cable, and hydraulic systems had been reduced to minimum functionality through jury-rigged repairs. Medical personnel attended to wounded crew members, while intelligence officers began damage assessment and mission debriefing procedures. The bomber's survival represented a statistical anomaly that would influence future aircraft design and crew training. American aerospace engineers would study the Mi Amigo's damage path to improve structural resilience and system redundancy in subsequent aircraft designs. Post-mission analysis revealed the broader significance of February 20, 1944. The 8th Air Force had demonstrated its capability to conduct sustained strategic bombing operations, despite severe losses and mechanical challenges. German fighter pilots had inflicted substantial casualties, but failed to prevent ordnance delivery against critical industrial targets. The day marked a turning point where American industrial capacity began overwhelming German defensive capability through sheer persistence and resource superiority. Lieutenant Kriegshauser and his crew received recognition for their performance under extraordinary circumstances, but the young pilot understood that individual heroism mattered less than collective achievement. The Mi Amigo had completed its mission not through superior courage or tactical brilliance, but through American engineering excellence and training doctrine that prepared aircrews for situations exceeding all reasonable expectations. Their success represented thousands of factory workers, engineers, instructors, and support personnel whose contributions made strategic bombing possible. The bombers' combat record would eventually include 24 successful missions over German-occupied Europe. Each flight demonstrated how American industrial capacity could overwhelm enemy defensive systems through sustained operational pressure rather than dramatic tactical victories. The aircraft and its successive crews embodied values that distinguished American military doctrine: technological innovation, crew coordination, mission persistence, and confidence that superior logistics would eventually prevail over individual tactical excellence. German fighter pilots gradually adapted their tactics to counter American bomber improvement, but faced insurmountable challenges created by resource limitations and training deficiency. Luftwaffe pilot quality declined throughout 1944 as experienced personnel were killed or wounded, while replacement training programs produced inadequately prepared aircrew. American bomber crews, supported by comprehensive industrial infrastructure, maintained operational effectiveness despite severe losses through systematic replacement and continuous equipment improvement. The strategic bombing campaign that began with skepticism and arrogance from German military leadership ended with their grudging respect for American persistence and industrial capability. Luftwaffe commanders, who had dismissed the Flying Fortress as an ineffective design, eventually recognized that American bombers represented not just individual aircraft, but symbols of national resolve backed by unprecedented manufacturing capacity. The sky above Germany had become American through determination rather than tactical brilliance. By May 1945, the Messerschmitt factories that the Mi Amigo had bombed in February 1944 lay in ruins, their production capabilities destroyed by months of sustained aerial bombardment. German fighter opposition had collapsed not through decisive tactical defeats, but through inability to replace losses faster than American industry could produce replacement aircraft and crews. The mathematics of attrition had favored the nation with superior logistics and unlimited industrial capacity. The men who flew these missions understood that their individual contributions formed small components of a vast industrial and military machine designed to overwhelm enemy capabilities through sustained pressure rather than dramatic victories. Each successful mission demonstrated American value: technological innovation, crew cooperation, mission persistence, and confidence that superior organization would eventually prevail over individual heroism or tactical excellence. The Mi Amigo's story reflects broader themes that defined the American experience in World War II. Industrial capacity transformed into military capability, technological innovation applied to strategic objectives, and individual courage channeled through collective effort toward measurable goals. The bomber and its crew represented millions of Americans who contributed to victory through disciplined effort rather than dramatic gesture. Today, the lessons learned from missions like the Mi Amigo's February 20th flight continue influencing defense and aerospace industries worldwide. The integration of advanced engineering, comprehensive crew training, and systematic logistics support that enabled strategic bombing campaigns has become fundamental to modern military aviation. The courage displayed by bomber crews above Germany established standards for military professionalism that endure in contemporary air combat operations. The young men who volunteered for bomber duty understood that they were participating in something larger than individual survival or personal glory. They were testing the limits of American industrial capability against German defensive determination, proving that democratic societies could mobilize resources and human talent more effectively than totalitarian regimes. Their sacrifice demonstrated values that distinguished American military doctrine and national character. Can you imagine the weight of responsibility these 23-year-old pilots carried, knowing that their decisions would determine not only their crew's survival, but also the success of strategic objectives that could shorten the war and save countless lives? The intersection of individual courage and industrial capability that characterized these missions created a template for American military effectiveness that continues influencing defense planning and aerospace development today. The memory of crews like the Mi Amigos reminds us that freedom requires constant vigilance and occasional sacrifice from those willing to risk everything for principles larger than personal comfort. Their legacy lives on in the continued excellence of American aerospace engineering, the professionalism of contemporary aircrew, and the industrial capacity that sustains democratic values against threats that evolve but never disappear entirely. If these stories of courage, innovation, and sacrifice resonate with your understanding of what makes nations great, Please subscribe to preserve these memories and share them with others who appreciate the price of freedom. These men gave their lives not for recognition or glory, but to ensure that future generations could live without fear of tyranny. Honor their memory by keeping their stories alive.